It was the kind of morning that felt like silence had weight, as if even the wind held its breath over the town of Carson Hollow, a place where old porches creaked in the sun, and the mailboxes had stories older than their owners, and just beyond the last row of modest houses with peeling paint and chain-link fences, a rust-colored field stretched wide, and quiet like it was hiding something forgotten until the stranger came. Nora lived at the edge of that quiet, her house tucked between wild sagebrush and a road barely used except by postmen, wanderers, or the occasional lost traveler. And most of her days were folded into the slow routine of watering her little tomato patch, sipping lukewarm tea on a plastic lawn chair, and tending to the few chickens that hadn't been snatched up by foxes last winter. Nora, 64, quiet, widowed, and alone, since the day her husband Leonard passed 5 years ago, kept to herself not out of bitterness, but because the quiet suited her, until that morning when she heard scratching near the back gate, low whimpering sounds not like the wind, but urgent, soft, and desperate. At first, she thought maybe one of the neighbor's cats had found its way over again, or maybe a raccoon. But as she peeked over the chipped wooden gate, what she saw made her heart thump in that old, aching rhythm that reminded her she still had a heart that could break. There stood a ragged, trembling mother dog, ribs pressing through her coat, eyes wide and tired, and behind her, 3 tiny pups huddled together, their fur matted, bellies sunken, each paw step unsure, as they tried to stay close to their mother. The mother dog didn't bark or growl. She just looked up at Nora with an expression so raw and resigned that it spoke louder than words. She wasn't asking for shelter, not even food. She was simply asking not to be chased away. Nora blinked, unsure if she was imagining it, but the ache in her chest told her this wasn't a dream. She slowly opened the gate, hands trembling more from awe than fear, and stepped aside, whispering gently, "You're safe here. It's okay now." The mother dog didn't rush in. She took a cautious step, sniffed the air, then turned to her pups with a quiet nudge of her nose, encouraging them forward like a soldier leading her last battalion through enemy lines. The pups staggered in, and Nora's eyes followed them as they curled up near her overturned wheelbarrow, too exhausted to even whimper. She knelt beside them, knees protesting from age and time, and saw up close what hunger and fear looked like when they settled into fur and bone. It wasn't just the visible ribs or the missing patches of fur. It was the way the pups flinched when her hand moved too fast, the way the mother dog sat just far enough to protect them, but close enough to trust her with a glance. For the first time in years, Nora's routine broke. She didn't check her tomatoes, didn't count the eggs, didn't bother with her tea. Instead, she opened her fridge, found some leftover chicken thighs from last night's dinner, and warmed them slowly in a pan, careful not to season them, tearing them into little bites with her arthritic fingers. The smell drew the pups first, their noses twitching, eyes blinking open in disbelief. The mother dog held back, watching, alert, until Nora placed a piece gently in front of her and whispered, "This is for you." It wasn't just a meal, it was a message. You're not alone anymore. Over the next few days, Nora named the mother dog Mira, short for miracle, because it was a miracle she'd made it that far, and the pups became Pip, Willow, and Rusty. Mira never barked, never whimpered. She just stayed near, watching, guarding, trusting in increments, as if she was teaching herself how to believe in humans again. Each day, the pups grew livelier, their ribs fading beneath new layers of fur and warmth, and Nora found herself laughing softly as Pip chased his own tail, or as Willow dragged an old sock around like a trophy. It wasn't just the pups who were healing. Nora felt something stirring in her two old memories of joy, the warmth of companionship, the quiet magic of shared mornings with someone who simply sat by your side without asking for anything but presence. But things weren't all easy. Word got around the neighborhood. Some folks saw the dogs and complained to animal control. They could be dangerous, diseased, said a man at the local grocery store, a man who once borrowed Nora's ladder and never returned it. Nora, usually too timid to confront, surprised herself by standing tall, saying, "They're family now." When an officer from animal control showed up at her gate, clipboard in hand, Mira stood in front of her pups, not growling, just still and tall. The officer looked at Nora, then Mira, then the tiny pups rolling around in the grass, and quietly closed his clipboard. "Looks like they're in good hands," he said, tipping his hat before walking away. Days became weeks, and soon Mira would nudge Nora's hand with her nose, asking for head pats, or curling up beside her feet on the porch, eyes closed in peace. One evening, a heavy storm rolled through Carson Hollow, lightning flashing across the wide sky like nature's fury. And as the thunder cracked, little Rusty cried out in fear. Mira whimpered, unsure how to calm him, until Nora picked the pup up, holding him to her chest like a baby, rocking softly in that creaky old chair. Mira came close, licking Nora's hand, eyes soft with gratitude. That was the night Mira finally laid her head in Nora's lap and slept without fear. But the true miracle came later. One quiet afternoon, a teenage girl with sunburned cheeks and eyes too sad for her age showed up at Nora's fence, staring at the dogs. "Her name's Mira," she asked, voice trembling. Nora nodded. "You know her?" The girl burst into tears. "She was mine before the fire. We lost everything. I thought she'd died." Turns out, the girl Lena had been part of a family that lost their home in a wildfire 6 towns over. Mira had run off during the chaos, and they assumed she was gone for good. Lena's parents had since moved into a small rental nearby, trying to rebuild their lives. Mira, it seemed, had survived the fire, carried her pups through fields, woods, and unknown miles just to find a place that felt safe, a stranger's yard that welcomed them home. Lena knelt beside Mira, who stared long and hard at her before bounding forward with a sound. Nora had never heard before a joyful bark, a whimper, a cry of reunion. The pups circled them, unsure but excited, and Mira licked Lena's face like time hadn't passed at all. Nora stood there, tears falling freely, heart full yet breaking. "They're yours," she whispered, but Lena shook her head. Only if we can still visit. I think she chose you too." So they shared. Mira had two homes now, one where her journey began, and one where it led her. Nora became a second grandmother to Lena, and the pups visited often, chasing chickens and napping in the sun. And every so often, when someone in town felt lost or broken, they'd wander past Nora's yard, where a dog once wandered in hungry and afraid, and find a woman, a pack of pups, and a story that proved the world still held miracles, especially the kind with fur. The days that followed the reunion between Mira and Lena flowed like the gentle current of a healing river, slow, deliberate, and filled with silent miracles that only hearts could recognize. And as the golden season of late summer unfolded over Carson Hollow, the once forgotten corner where Nora's modest home stood transformed into a gathering place for more than just one broken family. Because somehow, in ways only fate could script, Myra's quiet bravery, the pups' playful joy, and Nora's steadfast love became a beacon for others who had lost, who had wandered, who needed reminding that something as simple as a shared porch and a bowl of food could change everything. Children from the neighborhood began to visit regularly, not because they were invited, but because they were drawn, first by the sight of Willow leaping after butterflies, or Rusty tumbling over his own ears, and then by the way Nora greeted each child with a warm smile, never asking questions, only offering stories and slices of fresh bread with jam. Parents followed too, hesitant at first, unsure how to explain their presence, until they found themselves sitting in lawn chairs beside her, sipping coffee and watching their kids giggle in the grass. And always, Mira lay nearby, calm and ever watchful, as if she understood she had become the silent guardian of this little sanctuary. And amidst it all, Lena and her parents became regular threads in this new tapestry, Lena especially, who after so much loss found not just her beloved dog, but a kindred soul in Nora, whose wisdom wasn't wrapped in speeches, but in her quiet acts of care, the way she remembered everyone's names, how she listened without interruption, how she taught Lena to bake bread and prune tomatoes, and sit still enough to hear the hummingbirds when they visited the feeder. Life, it seemed, had not returned to what it was before, but something better, something earned. The pups grew, too, Pip with his uncontainable energy, Rusty with his comical clumsiness, and Willow with her soulful eyes and gentle nature, each developing their own quirks and habits that became the shared joy of the little community. Pip became the designated greeter, sprinting to the gate anytime someone approached and wiggling with excitement. Rusty took to digging mysterious holes in Nora's yard and hiding little treasures in them, half-eaten socks, chewed twigs, once even a missing garden glove. Willow, ever the observer, would often sit beside Nora in silence, her head on the woman's knee, as if she could sense the memories drifting behind Nora's eyes, especially when she looked at the old photo of Leonard on the mantel inside, the one she dusted every morning without fail. But time, relentless as ever, did not slow down even for stories blooming with beauty. One crisp morning in early autumn, Nora woke with a familiar ache in her bones, a deeper kind of tired that no amount of sleep could shake. And she knew, as surely as she knew the seasons, that something in her had shifted. She didn't speak of it to anyone, not out of fear, but because she didn't want sorrow to seep into the joy they had all built together. She went about her days just as before, feeding the pups, tending the garden, rocking gently in her chair while Mira lay at her feet. But Lena noticed. She always did. "You okay?" she asked one afternoon, brushing flour from her cheeks as they baked pumpkin muffins in the tiny kitchen. Nora smiled softly. "I am. I just want to make sure everything's ready for when I rest." Lena's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. Nora had taught her strength wasn't loud, it was quiet, enduring. Together, they wrote letters, prepared small boxes of keepsakes for the children who visited, and Nora taught Lena how to care for everything in the garden, where the tools were kept, what to say to Mira when she seemed restless. And one night, as the moon hung low and full over the yard that had once been just another lonely stretch of dirt and fence, Nora passed peacefully in her sleep. Mira nestled beside her, head resting on the woman's chest, heartbeats slowing together like a lullaby ending. The town grieved not just the loss of a woman, but of a soul who had reminded them that healing could be found in the simplest things. In kindness, in patience, in loving something broken until it bloomed. The funeral was held in Nora's yard, just as she wanted, beneath the maple tree where the pups often played. People came from every corner of Carson Hollow and beyond, neighbors, children, the officer from animal control, even a few strangers who had only heard the story secondhand, but felt moved to pay respects. Mira stood beside Lena, now almost 16, strong and composed, holding a worn letter in her hand, Nora's final note to her. "Keep listening," it said, "to the wind, to the dogs, to the quiet between people. That's where the stories are." And so Lena did. She moved into Nora's house with her parents, who had come to love the place as their own. Mira and the pups stayed, of course, their presence now a legacy of the journey that had begun with hunger and ended in home. But it didn't end, not really, because Lena, inspired by Nora's love for stories and her own bond with Mira, started recording the tailies of the yard, of each visitor, of every small act of healing and hope, and she shared them online under a name that came to her one night while looking at the stars with Willow curled beside her. She called it Moonlit Muzzle Stories, a tribute to the nights when everything was quiet except for the soft breathing of dogs and the soft crackling of the heart learning to hope again. The channel grew slowly at first, just a few subscribers who found comfort in the calm narration and real footage of the pups playing in golden light, of Mira leading them through tall grass like a queen shepherding her court. But then something unexpected happened. One of the stories about a boy who learned to speak again after bonding with Rusty went viral. And then another about an elderly man with dementia who remembered his wife's name after Willow lay in his lap during a visit. The world noticed, not because the videos were flashy or dramatic, but because they were real, human, raw, in the way only truth could be. Donations began arriving, not in large sums, but enough for Lena and her family to fix the fence, upgrade the chicken coop, build a small memorial garden for Nora with a plaque that read, "She made space for healing," and eventually start a nonprofit that rescued and rehabilitated stray dogs and partnered them with people in need of emotional support. Mira, now older and slower, remained the matriarch, her eyes still sharp, her presence still calming. The pups, now full grown and each with their own story, took on different roles. Pip as the attention seeker during outreach visits, Rusty as the digger of ceremonial planting holes, and Willow, quiet Willow, as the official therapy dog for children visiting the center. The town changed too. More homes put out bowls of water. Fewer calls came into animal control. Stray dogs, once feared, were now seen as potential miracles in waiting. The little yard at the edge of Carson Hollow had become more than a shelter. It was a testament to what happened when someone said yes to something desperate and small. When a gate was opened instead of closed. When a life worn by time chose love again. And through it all, the stories continued, every video ending with the same quiet reminder in Lena's voice. There's always room for another muzzle in the moonlight. And perhaps the most incredible part of it all wasn't that Mira had found her way back, or that the pups had survived, or even that a community had changed. It was that love, when given freely, becomes a kind of compass, guiding the lost back home, one paw step at a time.